greatly simplify things and should make it possible for the committees to move forward in a much more orderly fashion. However, it is all going to be about preparation. We've done a number of seminars already. We've done 4 seminars on the new submission tool that we use to submit proposals, which we now call public input, into the system. We have recorded one of those seminars and it is posted online, and we've also done another seminar on how task groups operate. And that seminar should make it easier for you to understand from a chair perspective and from a member perspective how groups can organize their work and report that same work back out to the full code making panel. Again, it is all about preparation. I'd now like to introduce Mike Johnston from the National Electrical Contractors Association. Mike is the chair of your correlating committee. Mike?
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate being here to share information with NFPA on this mock meeting. And as Mark indicated, the prior webinars, especially the one on task group preparation and chairs assigning task groups to complete work prior to the face-to-face meetings for the first revision, are extremely essential. As presented in that first webinar, if you haven't had a chance to view that webinar, I strongly encourage you to review the recording there to help yourself be as prepared as possible. There's going to be a template provided to all the committee members and to the task groups. And within this template, it's a Microsoft Word basic table template. This is where all the work will be performed consistently from panel to panel and from task group to task group. No other formats are going to be accepted at the face-to-face meetings.
Thank you, Mike. Our objectives today are to provide an overview of the new process and the new terminology. And we're going to talk about best practices for establishing effective task groups and reporting that information out. And we're going to do that by demonstrating how a meeting would be expected to operate. We'll review task group responsibilities and demonstrate how a panel can operate at the first draft meeting under the new process. We'll also show you how NFPA staff will enter the panel actions into our new software, which is referred to as Terra, at the meetings. And now Mike will talk about the new terminology. Mike?
Thanks, Mark. I think everyone is probably getting used to the new terms we use in this new process, but these next few slides just provide a review. Before we get going in this mock meeting, you're going to hear the panel chair and the task group chairs and the committee members use these terms. So I think it's important that the committee members and the chairs use the proper terminology so we're all on the same sheet of music. So you've heard the term public input and the acronym PI. This is what formerly was known as a public proposal to change the content of the code. The PI or PIs, plural, are the items that are used to create an FR. Okay? So a resolve, when we talk about resolving, this is an action that the committee is going to take on the PI or the PIs, and the committee resolves the PI by either creating a first revision, which is an FR, that's the acronym, or supplying a response committee statement indicating why the public input, PI, was not successful. So there will be a resolution to that, and they will be resolved. When we talk about resolve, It's either creating an FR or it's creating a reason why the proposal did not move forward. And an important point, this will be emphasized by the mock committee chair and by NFPA staff later in this meeting. Responses to PIs do not get balloted. It's very important that all committee members understand that responses to the PIs do not get balloted. If there's disagreement with the panel action or panel statement, those folks in disagreement are encouraged to submit public comments. It's still an open process and everyone can still participate, but the responses to the PI do not get balloted. On the next slide, you'll see the term first revision, and the acronym for that is FR. So you may hear a phrase like a task group chair may move first revision such and such from section such and such. The first revisions are balloted to change the content of the code by the committee. The committee is writing the code, and that is what's being voted on. The committee will write the code and develop the first revision based on the public inputs. So this is going to be important to have this understanding, especially as panel statements relate to the FRs. The second bullet you'll see on that slide is a committee input. And this is formally or informally known as floating a public input or proposal out there to see what happens. This is not permitted by the NEC Supplemental Operating Procedures. However, a failed first revision will come back. It becomes a CI, which is a committee input. Okay, so it will see activity as a committee input if it's a first revision that failed. Just a quick review of the task group, how the task group operates at the first draft meeting. And we talked about earlier the importance of task groups and task groups being prepared. The task group chair or designated spokesperson will represent the recommendation at the meeting as called upon by the chair. The panel creates the first revision for each change to the code. And each one of these first revisions will have a related PI or related PIs, multiple PIs, and these actions formerly were known as accept in principle, accept in part, and so forth. If a concept is presented by multiple PIs, those will go in the cart. The panel creates a first revision based on the concept introduced, if they agree. With no related PI, formerly a committee proposal can be created. A panel can create the FR, and the panel is the one that substantiates the FR. The panel is going to substantiate the first revision. So it's going to be important in the panel statement that phrases like the panel agrees with the submitter not be used, because the submitter is the panel. Okay, the panel resolves all PIs and provides a link, a reference in other words, to the related FR. Okay, PIs are going to be related to an FR. All PIs get resolved one way or the other. This provides a response advising why the proposed revision was not made. This is formally a reject. We don't use the word reject in this process anymore. It's a resolve, and resolve is an ANSI term for coming to resolution on a proposed change. So with that, that's a brief overview of the terminology we'll be using in the mock meeting and a short rundown of first draft meeting actions. I'm going to turn it back to Mark, and I believe we're getting ready to get going with our mock meeting. Mark?
I'd like to introduce the chair of the mock meeting, Jim Dollard from IBW Local 98, who's a member of the NEC Correlating Committee, and he chaired our mock meeting.
As everyone is well aware, there was a lot of task group action. Everyone received emails, and I had a lot of dialogue with the task group chairs because this new process is going to demand that we have task group work ready to go. So I'm going to start with task group number 1. Dave, you guys ready to go?
Yeah, task group 1, we're not quite ready between vacation and other schedule conflicts. We just didn't get a chance to get our heads together on this.
All right, Dave, you and your task group are going to have to get together lunchtime, evenings, whatever it takes. We need this task group work ready to go. All right, we'll go to task group 2. The task group 2 chair is Stan.
Mr. Chairman, the task group reviewed the scope you assigned, and we think we can just go PI to PI, the same way we did the proposal to proposal.
Okay, Stan, that's something that the chair is not going to permit. This new process that we have doesn't allow us to do that. In the past, we may have had 8 proposals to a single section or a single first level subdivision, and we got 8 cracks at the apple. We only get 1 bite at the apple here. And if we try to take them PI to PI, we're going to be continuously reconsidering a previous action on an FR. We're going to be opening it, modifying it, finishing it, and going back to it. So we can't do that. You and your task group, please get together at lunch and this evening and get that work done. We're ready to go. All right, we're going to have to start with task group number 3. Mark?
Mr. Chairman, we changed direction midstream, and now we have to revise all of our suggested actions. We didn't think we were going to be up first, and we're planning on getting this done tonight.
Okay, it looks like the wheels have come off here, and it looks like we're not ready to get our work started. And I'm not going to burden the full committee with acting PI to PI. If we even attempt to do that, we're going to have major problems here. So here's what the chair is going to do. It's 8:15 a.m. All task groups are going to begin to finish their work right now. So whatever you need to do to reshuffle the room, task group 1, task group 2, and task group 3, meet with your chairs. I'm going to adjourn the meeting, and I will call the meeting order again at 1 p.m. Let's get this task group work done and try it again at 1.
But Mr. Chair, with all due respect, you can't do that. We really need to start. There's an awful lot of work to do. Can't we just do what we did in the previous cycle and just start handling these things?
Mike, I'm not going to allow that to happen. You're going to see as we move forward here that, the group here, there's only 1 or 2 of you that have seen this process in the past, and they're nodding their heads. They understand why I am stopping this meeting and getting the task groups to get their work done. We have to be prepared. We can't go into this PI to PI, otherwise we're going to continuously reconsider previous actions, and I'm just not going to allow that to happen. In order for this new process to work, the task group has to bring a suggested action. That's not going to be the be-all, end-all. The committee is going to consider it, but if there's 8 PIs to a particular section, the task group is going to come back with a basic recommendation on all 8, so that maybe we can resolve all of those PIs in 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 whacks, but we're going to have a game plan. So I'm going to stop this meeting. We're going to start again at 1 o'clock. And at this point, we'll go to Mark and to Mike to recap what occurred in the mock meeting this far.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Well, this is a real good example of a panel getting off to a rocky start, and the task groups not being ready and prepared with their work to facilitate the work of the entire committee on the PIs at this meeting. So So what this example does is it emphasizes the importance of having the work prepared and bringing it to the committee ready to go, but also provides a nice example of how we anticipate the chair reacting to this type of condition. We really anticipate and really encourage the chairs to stop it. If the wheels are coming off and it's going nowhere fast, the chair needs to stop the meeting and it needs to reconvene. The chair needs to reconvene the task groups to make sure they're on track so that when they do reconvene, they're in a position to get some meaningful work done. Mark?
Yeah, great summary. It's very important that the committees be organized, that this is how you start off on the right foot, by being prepared. Again, as we said earlier, this is not to preclude committee discussion. Rather, this is to get the committee discussion headed in a direction. So let's now go back to the meeting. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Mark. Okay, it's 1 o'clock. I'm going to reconvene the meeting. We're going to get things rolling here. I'm going to go first to the, I know that there's one task group ready to go, but I want the entire committee to understand where we're at. So I'm going to go first to task group 1 and the task group chair, Dave.
Well, we're not quite ready, but we're almost there. We now have consensus on a few big items, and we should be ready to go first thing tomorrow morning.
Okay, Dave, and task group 1, thanks. And I did have a brief discussion with all of you, and I think that you now see the reason that we adjourn the meeting. We have to have, you know, in order for us to be effective, we have to have everything correlated and have a basic idea, a direction, if you will. All right, task group 2, Stan?
Mr. Chairman, we are ready.
Okay, all right, and that's where we're going to start. Task group 3, Mark, can you give us an update?
Task Group 3 has about 90% of their work done. We had a large workload, and we plan on finishing it tonight, and hopefully we'll be ready first thing in the morning.
Okay, Mark, thanks. And I think that everyone can see the value of putting this effort into the task group. It's going to make our committee work go in a much more effective manner. So with that, I'm going to go to task group number 2, Chair Stan. And Stan, can you get us rolling?
I certainly will. Kim, would you please put the task group Word document on the screen?
Mr. Chairman, could we get a copy of that task group report?
Thanks, Dave. And, you know, in error, I didn't let you know, but, you know, since the task group work was getting done late, about 12:30, I got the stick from Stan, and Kim has emailed the work to everybody. And that's how this is going to work. You're going to get the task group work in a Word format on the template, and we can only work from the template. And during the task group work this morning, I saw many of you didn't have your work in that format, and it made extra work for you, but we can only give the work to the staff liaison on that standard template. So if you check your email, you will find that template there, and on each action, whether it's task group 1, 2, or 3, the task group chair is going to clearly identify PIs that are involved with potential actions and the page number in your docket so that you can quickly get to them and review them if you haven't had the time to do so already.
This is Mark Early. I just wanted to interrupt this for a moment and let you know that what you will be receiving from us as committee members will not be all that much different than what you've seen before. You'll get a cover memo, a list of all of the material assigned to you. We call them public inputs, but essentially at this point they would be the equivalent of proposals. And then you'll get the public inputs themselves, and they'll look a lot like what you've received previously. So just wanted to provide that additional explanation that that there won't be a huge change in what we send to you. And now we're going to rejoin the meeting with the discussion of the potential motions that can be made in a panel meeting.
Take a look. Let's run down the motions here. And looking at the screen, this should look familiar to you. Any of you that took the time to go through your meeting notice, you're going to find that this is on the last page. It's in the back of your meeting notice. And this is a very helpful little cheat sheet for you with the new process until you get familiarized with the process. So let's take a look. This table is broken out into 3 columns, and let's look first at the previous action. So in the past, where we took some type of an affirmative action on a proposal, we accepted it in part, in principle, whatever we did, that now, whenever we take an action to accept, to make a change, that's going to be called a first revision. So we're going to generate that first revision and substantiation for the change. And you're going to hear the task group chair, if that's what they're going to suggest, make a motion, something like, I make a motion to create a first revision on section 300.4 based on PI 836. So that's going to give you some guidance, and the task group chair will also let you know where that PI is located in your docket so you can quickly find it. In some cases, we will put multiple PIs. Where there's a driver, where there's one PI that is going to drive the action, we're going to identify it as a driver, and you'll see later that Kim and his staff liaison on any committee can actually take that PI and generate an FR in Terra, which allows us to quickly go in there, make some basic changes if it's really close to what we want, and move on. But getting back to a PI and PIs in the cart, if there's 5 PIs that want to do the same thing, and we agree with all of them, but one's written a little bit better than the others, that becomes the driver, and then we put the other PIs in the cart. Remember that when you put those PIs in the cart, all of the PIs will have the same substantiation. So if there is a reason to go into a single PI and add some additional substantiation, we can do that. But if we had 5 PIs, one of them were basically accepted, and the other 4, there was some things that we didn't accept, we can add all of that into the substantiation here and move on. So basically, an accepted committee proposal is really a first revision. You can see that in the second row of the table. And again, the task group chair will, or any committee member, will have a motion similar to I make a motion to create a first revision and move on from there. Now let's get into that last row where we're going to reject a PI. And in the past, we just said we reject the public proposal. And as you heard earlier up front, you heard Mark and Mike telling you that every public input gets resolved, and that is correct. So by creating an FR and having a driving PI and maybe a few in the cart, they all get resolved, meaning we're done with them. We don't need to do anything else. If we're going to reject it, then what we've done thus far is we have just used the term resolve. So looking on the bottom right there on the table, you'll hear the task group chair make a motion similar to, I make a motion to resolve PI number 521 with the following committee statement. Again, keep in mind that if there are multiple PIs that we want to resolve, which is basically a reject, and we can do so with the same statement, well then we can roll all of those into the cart and do those in one action. And Kim, thank you very much for putting that on the screen, and she will now put the ready to go file on the screen, and you will also see from time to time the task group work in a Word document, okay? Okay, Stan, are we ready for your first proposed action?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I move a first revision to section 300.4A to add the word conductor to the title on its first level subdivision. This FR is based on PI 836 on page 68 of the CMP docket.
Okay, everybody can see the task group work there in the task group template, and Stan has just moved the first revision to 300.4A. He gave you the driving PI and the location of that so that everybody can find that information quickly. All right, the motion on the floor is to create an FR in 300.4A. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to create an FR. Stan, are there any other PIs for 300.4A?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. However, the task group is recommending they be resolved.
Okay, all right, for the information of the committee, remember we only get one bite at the apple, so we only get one whack at 300.4A. If you disagree with the committee and you want to bring up the merits of any of those PIs, now is the time to do it. Okay, Stan, on the discussion there, anything you want to share with us on the substantiation?
Just to clarify, this is just adding conductors to the laundry list of things that afford the same protection from physical damage. The task group was unanimous in proposing this recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, why don't we just agree with the submitter?
Mark, I'm glad you brought that up because that is typical, and we've seen a few other committees go through the same learning process. We can't do that. We can't say that we agree with the submitter because we are the submitter. This is a first revision that is being created. This is not a public input. So it's our work, and we need to provide substantiation. And as you'll see, when we've got a driving PI, Kim can pull that PI into Terra and create an FR. So we can pull the substantiation from the submitter into the first revision. But keep in mind, that statement now becomes ours. In the past, we accepted a proposal, then we could look down at the statement and the public, someone else may not like something that was in the statement. We could say, well, you know what? We didn't write that. In this case, we are writing it, so we do need to create a substantiation for every FR. And thanks for bringing that up. It's a key point. Okay. On the discussion. Mike, you got anything on the discussion? I see you scratching your head there.
Yeah, the panel statement simply provides an example of demonstrating the need for this first revision. That's all we were trying to do in this case.
Okay, all right, and so what you're getting at is the fact that the substantiation mentions a GEC. It's not limited to a grounding electrode conductor, right?
That's correct.
Okay, any further discussion on this motion to create a first revision in 300.4A? Okay, Kim's going to add the PI to Sarah. She's going to pull up the PI, and she's going to walk you through this. I'm not going to walk you through it, but Kim's going to pull up the PI, and you'll see how she can create an FR.
Okay, I stopped it for a moment just to show, to give you a little bit more explanation. What you're seeing here is how this is going to be displayed on the staff liaison's screen. Our purpose in showing you these is so that you understand what it is that you're looking at. Our purpose is not to teach you the intricacies of the software, because this is software that your staff liaison will be using, but it looks different than what you've seen before. And what they're actually doing here is they are working in the code. So all of the public inputs and later the first revisions will be displayed in line in the code text. Okay.
And she's going to walk you through this. I'm not going to walk you through it, but Kim's going to pull up the PI, and you'll see how she could create an FR with that, and then...
And again, this is taking you through the steps so you see what it is that the staff is doing. In this case, you see the little box there. We are in the process of creating the first revision.
You know, in the future, we'll be able to do that and make any additional changes that we need.
Okay, at this point, we're telling it to create the first revision, and we're using, we're proposing some changes to the language, but we're using some of the input from the, or some of the text from the public input. And this is what that language is going to look like. And just like in the past, we have to add a committee statement. But one of the big differences now is we are adding a committee statement to everything. In the past, if you accepted a proposal, you could add a committee statement if you wanted to, but you didn't have to. Now with the new process, you have to, because the committee statement or the first revision belongs to the committee, so now the committee has to explain why they did what they did.
All right, no further discussion seen. All those in favor of creating this FR for 300.4A, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that's another FR into the books. And Stan, what does the task group have next?
And this simply shows that when you go back and look in the document, it will indicate that something has been done in 300.4. In this case, we've created this first revision.
Mr. Chairman, I move to create an FR on 300.4A2 based on PI 837 on page 18 of the agenda. Also, there are no other PIs on this section.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to create an FR on section 330.4A2. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Stan, can you give us a brief explanation of what this proposed FR will do?
Just to summarize the statement, the submitter wanted actually the electrical inspectors to do the job of building inspectors, and this really doesn't belong in the NEC.
Okay, no further discussion seen. All those in favor of creating this FR in 330.4A2, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, at this point, we're going to go back to Mark and to Mike for a little recap.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Here, it can clearly be seen that Stan, the task group chair, has created effective use of the task group to facilitate the meeting. The task group keeps the wheels in motion and keeps the meeting flow going, and provides proposed actions and gives the panel a good starting point. There really can only be one first revision to an individual subdivision, so all PIs to that subdivision or section must be considered when you're acting on that FR. The task group chair also identifies if there's a driving PI. There may not be in all cases, but in many cases there is, and where it's located so the committee members can quickly access that and stay on the same page as the task group and the task group chair. And it's clear by this work that the committee acts on the FR. So there is discussion, and the full committee can debate the issues and create a full, well-rounded discussion before they move to the vote. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Jim. That's a great first example.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, or thank you, Chairman of the Correlating Committee. All right, now we're going to go back to our task group work. We're going to go back into task group 2, and I'm going to go back to Stan. Stan, what does the task group have next?
Mr. Chairman, I move to resolve PI 838 on page 7 and PI 23 on page 1 in a single action. Most PIs seek to modify 300.4G.
Okay, thank you, Stan. All right, the motion on the floor is to resolve PIs 838 and 839 in the same action. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all right. Please note, everybody, that, Stan pointed out the page numbers for those PIs, and we're going to look at resolving those with a single action. Is there a statement, Stan?
There's a statement, and it boils down to there was no technical substantiation provided from the submitter.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not really in agreement with rejecting both of these PIs, but I'm not going to hold things up right now. I'll just vote negative on my ballot.
Mark, I'm glad you brought that up. I want to re-emphasize a key point here with all of the committee members. We will not be balloted on public input PIs that we resolve. We will only be balloted on first revisions. So it's very different. Committee members are used to being able to vote on a proposal that was rejected, and they could weigh in and give everybody their 2 cents. That's not going to happen anymore. So if there is a PI that is being resolved and you disagree, well then you want to focus on the statement and you want to be sure to submit a public input. But just to make sure that everybody, fully understands, you will not be balloted on resolved PIs. You will only be balloted on first revisions. Okay, and we're going to go to Mike and Mark for a quick recap on what just happened there.
Okay, it's important to note that all public inputs get resolved as part of the process. We tend to use the word resolve when the panel is, in effect, rejecting the proposal for public input. So they're essentially resolving it and answering it and not making a change to the code. We can resolve or reject one or more public inputs in a single action, provided that the statement is accurate and covers all of the public inputs and answers what it is that they're trying to do. So this new process can be more efficient than what we used to because you can take action on a number of PIs at the same time. A single action takes care of them all. Now, back to the meeting.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, and I'm going to go back to the task group chair, and I think that at this point, everyone, all the committee members, really understand just how important the task group work is in making this new process effective. The task group work is simply a tool to make our work effective. All right, Stan, what do we got next?
Mr. Chairman, the next item is the second to last one. I move a first revision to section 334.12B. Delete the list item number 4. This FR is based on PI 840 on page 6 of the CMP docket, and there are 4 additional PIs that should be added to the cart that all want the same action.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to create a first revision in 334.12B. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I just want to make sure that the committee is focused and takes a look at the screen, and you will see that this proposed PI is to create a first revision. The driving PI is the first one there. It's 840, but there's 4 more in the cart.
And you can see 840 is here. It's the second one, but we've selected that one. You only see 2 here, but there are actually 4.
And they are 695, 90, 8, and 450. So just keep in mind they will all have the same statement, and they are all resolved in this first revision. On the discussion, Stan?
The statement from the task group reads as follows. Type NM is to be used for temporary power for decades while exposed to both wet and damp locations. without any known problems. We're not really sure what the committee was thinking of when they added this in 1999.
Okay, any more discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I think that the statement for our first revision was basically copied from the PI. It states, for example, I am not sure what the committee was thinking when they made this requirement. Is that something we really want to say to the public?
You know, you're right. We need to take that out. Kim, can you strike the last sentence?
Yeah.
Okay, everybody, let's you know, that's a lesson for us all to learn, and we need to be careful. I know exactly what happened there, Stan. I'm looking at the PI, and it looks like you guys just cut and paste that substantiation right from the PI, and we really need to be careful, because we can use the substantiation that a submitter gives us in a PI, but remember, once we do that, they become our words. And Dave, thank you very much for picking that up. Is there any more discussion? I've seen all those in favor of creating this FR to 334.12B based on PI 840 with 4 more in the cart, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, another FR goes into the books. At this point, we're going to go to Mike and Mark for comment.
Thank you, Jim. So as can be seen, this is a good example of multiple PIs being handled with one action by use of the cart in Terra. And basically, if they're all looking for the same thing, this is an effective way to resolve multiple issues. It's important to understand that if an individual response is desired for any one of the PIs, they can be resolved separately. So anything can be pulled out, and the panel can act on it and resolve those issues separately, as long as there's a record for it. The other thing that is important, and you saw a nice activity in this last example about being sure what you're conveying in your statements. You also should be careful when copying the statement directly from the PI, as they may require some edits to be in the voice of the panel. Got to be very, very careful of that, because you don't want to take things directly from the submitter of the PI, because it's actually the panel statement going with the FR. Task Group Chair noted which PI to use as the basis. In other words, he identified the driver. That's because the PI was exactly what the panel wanted to do. If the PI is close, in other words, the concept is very close to what they wanted to do, the panel can revise the recommendation or revise the existing code text accordingly. And it's important that the concepts introduced by the PI might not be the exact word of the wording of the FR. The panel still has to do their work, make sure it's in code language that they want, make sure it conforms to style manual requirements, and so forth. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark. Mark has some additional items and possibly moving toward conclusion. Mark?
Thanks, Mike. As you can see, the process is different from what we've been using in the past, but it's really not daunting. Ultimately, what you're doing is you're making a decision. Do we change the code, or do we leave it as is? If you change the code, you don't necessarily have to take word for word what's been submitted. You can revise it, but you don't have to deal with except in principle in part, except in part, or any of that other stuff. You're just creating a first revision and explaining what it is that you did. Or you're not creating a first revision, you're resolving it and explaining why you're not moving forward with a change. If you think of it in those terms, it's actually pretty simple. And we hope that these examples have given you a better understanding of what this new process is all about. I encourage you to look at the meeting notice that we sent out. There's a lot of information in there on how the process is supposed to work. As was pointed out to you earlier, the last page of the meeting notice is all of the actions that committees can take. I want to thank the members of the mock meeting committee for the great job, and I also want to thank Mike Johnston, Kim Shea, and Carolyn Cronin for their work in assembling this webinar for you today. I want to point out the important dates left in the process. The closing date for paper submissions was on October 3rd. At this point in time, the only additional submissions that we can take are submissions using the electronic tool, and we can accept those up until midnight on November 7, 2014. The first draft meetings will be held in Hilton Head, January 12th through 24th, and individual panel dates are posted on the NEC Doc Info page under the Next Edition tab. And many of you already have the meeting notice that contains all of that information. In summary, we do anticipate, as usual, an NEC-sized agenda, and because of the agenda size, task groups will be an essential component to successful first draft meetings. The task group work must be completed and submitted to the panel chair and to Kim Shea at the email address you see on your screen prior to the first draft meeting to ensure successful and effective completion of each panel's workload. Links to the recorded PI submission webinar and the task group webinar are posted on the Doc Info page at www.nfpa.org/70, and you can find them under the About tab, and there you'll locate them under the additional information heading. I want to thank you for your attention, and we'll now open this up to questions. Okay, thanks everybody for all of you who've stuck around, and we are going to open it to questions. Kim tells me that a couple of you folks used the chat feature, and so I will be doing that shortly. I do ask that if you've been using computer audio and phone audio, that you mute your computer audio, which will keep us from getting the sonar pings. Okay, one moment and I will unmute the line.
All guests have been unmuted.
Okay, Kim, do you want to tell me what we have for questions?
Let me scroll through, find the first one. I was answering some of them by chat, and those people that received a reply via chat, if you think it needs further discussion, please bring it up or ask for further explanation or to go over it again for all parties' information. Oh, we're having a problem with the connection. Connection lost on my end.
Okay.
Can you pull up the chats on your side?
Let's see.
There they are.
Okay.
There's a lot of just hellos in this.
Okay, one moment.
Just a moment.
Why don't I just ask the first person who would like to go ahead and ask a question,
Mark, the first question was from Brian Rock, and he asked, how are those parts of a public input that are not accepted, for example, accept in part, accept in principle in part, how are they reflected in the first revision motion? And that's an excellent question. That gets right to the core of what it is we're talking about here. And what happens here, a good way to look at it, is that every first revision is really a panel proposal. And what you're doing is you're looking at these public inputs and you're taking some ideas. So to Brian's point, how do you reflect the accept in part and the accept in principle, et cetera? That's done in your statement. So in the substantiation, we could build an FR, we could get in there everything that we want, but there's a driving PI and 3 in the cart, and there's 5 distinct points brought up in those that we didn't use. So we can build an FR, we can substantiate it, and we can say, you know, we considered these following ideas, but we didn't go that way, and here's why. And if we do it that way, then we just wiped out 5 PIs in one FR, and that's where the task group work is going to come in. So that was the first question. I just thought I would jump in until you got online there, Mark.
Neil Zarnecki?
Go ahead, Bill.
Or Neil? Was it Neil?
Oh, yeah, this is Neil Zarnecki. I had 2 quick questions.
Sure.
The first one was January's coming pretty fast, and there's a lot of things going on between now and January. When are we going to find out what task groups are organized, who the task group chairs are, who the task group members are, and when and where they're going to meet?
Okay. Fair question. I'll ask the correlating committee chair if he'd like to address that one, or I will.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, if a lot of these questions that are coming up now were actually addressed in the task group preparation and assignment webinar that you can view in its recorded state. That link is on the website. But to answer that question, the chairs are being instructed to assign their task groups, and as the work is distributed, they will be involved in helping the task group chairs with their scope of work, so they can establish what each task group is responsible for. And this will happen in a short period of time after the closing date. So what has to happen now is essentially preparing the committee for addressing all their work using this new task group method. And then once the docket is received by the chairs, they can be distributed and the task group assignments can begin at that time, and then the committees will be off and running sometime around the middle of November to prepare their work for the meeting in January.
Thank you. My only comment is that's an awfully short time frame to get all this done. My second question was, I've listened to all these webinars and I've participated in this whole thing. And the one piece of information that I'm missing is, why was this change made?
Well, thanks for that question. And this is something that affects all NFPA codes and standards. And this came about because some folks did feel that there was some confusion in the existing process, and this was intended to make that a whole lot clearer, and also to reflect some technology improvements, because now we can show you a draft of what the code's going to look like throughout the process, as opposed to trying to put together a whole bunch of stuff and then trying to figure out how the code's going to read later. Thank you.
Hey, Mark, 2 questions.
Sure.
The first one's a little expansion on the task groups, and I think what you said early on, the use of the task groups and the work of the task groups is key to making this new process work. But once the task groups are formed and the members are selected, when will the dates and times and locations of those task group meetings be published, so that should members of the public or other panel members want to sit in on them, as is permitted by the rules, when will that take place?
That's a fair question, and I don't have an answer for you on that yet. We will be meeting with the panel chairs here in November, and we'll try to get those kinds of things worked out.
You know, since a lot of the work is going to be done in the task groups, I think it would be important to get those dates, times, and locations as soon as possible, because if it's not, it's almost as if the public is not being encouraged to sit in on these open meetings. So my second question is, after all of the FRs have been created and entered into the system towards the end of the full panel meeting, when will all that information be available to the panel members so that we can go back to organizations where we have directed votes?
Okay, great question, and let me get back to the last one, to the first one, and that is, keep in mind that the task groups are just intended to develop a straw man for the committee to work with, and ultimately the code-making panel does have the final authority on what gets created, and I expect, as usual, there'll be vigorous debate, and so again, it's just to establish a starting point. And let's see, what was the second question?
Regarding ballots, basically?
Oh,
or
yeah. And what we do have a process for that, because we recognize there are organizations that have directed votes, like NEMA, and we will be doing essentially a quick print version of the first revision so that they have something that they can work with. And that should be following along pretty shortly. The ballot is now going to be much later than it's been in the past, and we've been, in the past, starting to generate ballots before meetings are over. But now, the reason for the later ballots is the fact that you're going to get a draft that's been worked over pretty well.
Any idea how long after the close of the meetings that we'll get that?
Yes, it is in the schedule. I don't have the date right in front of me, but I can look that up. And
I believe it's something like March 26th.
Yeah, it's usually 6 to 8 weeks after the meeting that the ballot gets issued now.
Well, I'm not talking about the ballot. I'm talking about access to the FRs so we could discuss them back with our organizations. I mean, waiting until March is 3 months.
Yeah, well, you won't have to wait until March, because we're going to be generating a quick print version so that you'll have something you can discuss with your organization.
So then my question is, how long after the meeting closes will the quick print version be available?
Yeah, I don't have that here in front of me.
But we're talking a few weeks, a few days?
Yeah, we do have that. We do have a schedule for that, and I'll have to get back to you on that point.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mark, Jim Brunson.
Yes, Jim.
This process seems to be somewhat analogous to the task group process we've been using in the correlating committee for a number of cycles.
Correct.
Yes, it is.
Prepare a position, and then the entire correlating committee can chime in on it. You agree?
Yeah, that's very true. And with the panels, it becomes much more critical because we oftentimes have, I mean, let's face it, there are sections we know that we're going to see proposals on 11026, 250, 66, 250, 122, 210.8, 210.12, 210.52, and we tend to get lots of proposals in the past on those sections, and this requires that the panels take a look at all that stuff and decide once and for all, what are you going to do? In the past, we would sometimes have the panels would work through the stack and might make multiple changes, and they'd be in different actions, and sometimes we'd have to struggle to put all that together. So this gets the panel focused on doing all that stuff up front and coming up with one solid position.
Right. And I do have a specific question on the slide that you had up during the presentation dealing with PI 837. And that was one that the panel, apparently, the substantiation indicated that essentially they didn't accept the proposer's change, but on the template it said FR rather than say resolve. Why would it say FR if there was no first revision text resulting from that PI?
You've got an error. Let me go back and put that back up again.
Keep going.
Mark, this is Jim Doward, and it could very well be an error. I just wanted to make one comment just so that everybody understands. You know, when we are saying you're going to get one bite at the apple, you can get, for example, if you've got a section, a standalone section, you get one whack, that's it. But if you can get into a first level subdivision, a second level subdivision, a third level subdivision, you could take a whack at each piece. And each committee is going to see that. For example, we do have some sections that they have 5 or 6 first level subdivisions. You know, 240-21 is a really good example there. But you can take actions on those individual first level subdivisions. They could be separate actions. You can also roll them all into one. That's going to be up to both the task group and the full committee. And again, the task group work is not the be-all, end-all. They're just going to organize. They're going to let the committee know how many PIs there were, what they think is going to be resolved, what they think might make it into an FR. But ultimately, it's the full committee, and the public sitting there watching them is going to make that decision.
Okay, but can we go? I don't think that quite answered my question, unless you're definitely telling me that was an error on the.
Yeah, Jim, I don't know. You got to remember that was all fictitious, Jim. It was just made up.
Yeah,
I understand, but there seemed to be a conflict between that.
Yeah.
Jim, Jim Brunson, you're right. We went back and looked at it, and you're right. We did resolve that one. There was an error in that slide, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. I found that confusing. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, fair enough. We were wrong.
Les Easter, Mark.
Yes, Les.
Yeah, in the past, the way we did things, when you would have a public input, there might be some sort of a associated document or study or something, say available at NFPA. Yet when you'd try and go get it, and what you got was not what was really presented. Once our task groups would start to meet, and then it'd only be available during the day of the task group. How are you addressing that, or are you?
Thanks for that question, and that relates to the availability of copyrighted material. Somebody submits to us something that is copyrighted, they need to also include copyright permission if the material is to be posted online. If we don't get the copyright permission, then what we need to do is just have a copy of that available at the meeting for the committees to look at. But we, particularly since we're now publishing so much online, we can't take advantage of fair use anymore, because online publication is, in many cases, far broader than the exposure things may have had in the normal
a graph or information that you have developed or anything that does not have copyright protection can be attached to the PI. And when the links go live where the public and committee members can view the PIs online, you'll be able to access those attachments.
I understand that. My question is more related to the ones that say that's available and it's not, and you really don't get it. If the task groups are going to be kind of pre-meeting before they really get to a task group meeting, the document doesn't show up until, like, whoever submitted it, until the very day that we're trying to get something ready before we go into our actual panel meetings. That's what I was more referencing to.
Okay, if there is something that says it's available at NFPA, you can contact me, and I can provide a copy of it watermarked that it's for committee use only to that task group, rather than publishing it online and having it attached for everybody to see. Because of the copyright thing, I believe we're permitted to distribute with watermarks over it that this is for task group use only.
Yes, I hate to be a little bit narrow about what I'm trying to say here, but I'm saying that they have people have or organizations have submitted this is available at NFPA, but when you go to NFPA, it's not the document they're talking about, and we don't really get it until the very end to begin the public input stage in this case.
Well, I'm a little confused at the question because I have been tracking the supporting material for the NEC for a couple cycles now. Back when everything was coming in on paper, we would take whatever was submitted with the public input and file it, make an electronic copy of it, and it was what was submitted. Now, if people are submitting things online and saying they're attaching something that they're not, we can't control that.
Kim?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Mike Johnston. Perhaps we'll put this as an item for the correlating committee to discuss to make sure that the technical committees are prepared to do their work and they have access to what they need.
Thank you.
Greg Keaton.
Go ahead.
I have a question. While I understand the whole process and it makes sense, what I don't understand is why does at an accepted first revision need a substantiation? This is a lot of additional work basically to say this committee accepts this text because of this. Never did that in the past.
Well, what happens is now the work, if the committee creates a first revision, it does become the committee's work. The committee can reuse the substantiation as their own statement. The committee needs to be a little careful when they do that and may have to edit it just to make sure that the statement is appropriate coming from the committee.
Mark?
That becomes a statement. Did you want to comment, Mike?
Yeah, we have to include that as a step in this process to meet ANSI's requirements because the committee is creating the first draft. There has to be reason and justification, even if it's aligning with what the submitter originally proposed with their PI. It's a process step that has to be included, even if it's a simple statement, one sentence.
Question on the date we're meeting. Are we flying in Sunday and leaving Sunday for Code Panel 2?
I will tell you at this point in time, we don't really know yet. I mean, we have this problem every cycle when we set these dates in advance, which of course everyone wants us to do. But we won't know what the workload is like until probably sometime in the second week of November.
So will you send out a revised schedule for us to make our air plan for?
We will inform the committee chair of what the workload's like, and a lot of knowing when it is you can depart really depends upon how effective the work is up front.
Hey, Mark. Tim Crowshore.
Yes.
Hey, Mark. When will the new panel member assignments be available by the Standards Council?
The Standards Council is meeting in October. I don't have the dates right in front of me.
October 28th in Nashville.
Okay, so it'll probably be a couple weeks after that before our database gets updated and all the panel lists are updated with the new members.
Okay, and then task groups will be assigned by the chairs after that time, right, Kim?
Yeah, so our task groups could be formed now, and then the new members invited to participate in one after the fact. I don't think the chairs need to wait necessarily.
Well, with many of the organizational representatives, ahead of each code-making panel, we oftentimes do personnel changes. So, it's important to understand maybe what personnel changes are in the mix so that those chairs are aware of that for the task groups. Because some personnel will not be available for panels that they were on, and some personnel will be available on new panels.
You can certainly reach out if you are on a panel and want to be involved in some task group, or you're an applicant to a panel and want to be proactive. You can reach out to that panel chairman and let him know that you have an application pending and that you'd like to be included.
But won't those personnel changes include the panel chair changes as well?
We don't anticipate any panel chair changes at this meeting.
No.
We have
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, I would like to thank everyone for your participation today.
Hey, Mark?
Yes,
Excuse
go
me.
ahead.
This is Dave Wexler. I put some things in online, and I guess I wasn't going to get a chance to ask you, but it is kind of important here, and I would like to get your input. So my question is this. It seems to me that a public input may now be resolved, using that term, by either making a first revision or it may be declared resolved under this, in which case, if it's resolved, not as a first revision, but simply resolved, it would seem to me it's kind of dead on arrival, there's no further discussion, and it's not going to appear in balloting. Is that correct?
It will not appear in balloting, but it is still subject to public comments. So a public comment can bring it back to life.
But a public comment, again, is in the second phase, not the first phase, correct?
Correct.
So if I'm part of an organization and I want to see what has been taken out as a resolution and it's not appearing in the ballot that I'm being asked to vote on, how do I flag that? Or is it too late? It has to come up under the next phase.
First of all, now participation in the meetings becomes much more critical because that's your opportunity to weigh in. At the next stage, you can submit a public comment like you could in the past to bring it back to life. Another significant change is that if you have not submitted a public comment, that there is no ability to bring it up at the annual meeting. So the public comment becomes critical if you want to bring it back to life.
Okay, so my last question then, if there's an issue that we think is of a concern, but maybe it's not the highest concern, maybe it's not enough to generate a first revision, but we want to err on the side of conservatism, then an action from the public panel to get it into the first portion of the cycle would be to make it a first revision and then take it out perhaps at the second part of the cycle of the process?
Well, you don't really have to do that unless you think it's a change that needs to be made. And, I'd caution you that if you put something in the hopes of knocking it out later, there's potential that it doesn't get knocked out and it goes all the way through. So make the changes that you want to make.
Okay, I appreciate the guidance. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Okay, hearing no one else.
Procedural question, Mark.
Sure.
So committee open, a motion's made to open a first revision, has multiple PIs referenced, but during discussion, say, or as a result of the task group, two of the PIs want to be used to result in edited text, and one of them wants to be resolved out without changing text. Are those all still processed in that single motion action?
You can process them together, or if you want to separate something out to make a different statement, you can certainly do that. The only thing is you can only create one first revision.
Right, and so the panel statement in regard to the PI that is not going to result in a change of text simply gets the panel statement addressed in that same FR. Since it addressed the same section of code.
Well, what oftentimes will happen with those is you, let's say you have a bunch that say that all this conduit should be colored blue, and the others say that it should all be colored red. You probably want to group the blues together because those are causing a first revision, and then you want to group the reds together because those are not causing a first revision. So you really want to make sure that the things that are put together relate.
Right. That's why I asked the question. I just didn't get it out clearly. During discussion, the decision about one of the PIs changing rather than resulting in edited text, it's determined that no desired. Does the motion have to be changed? Does it have to be done? Or does the committee simply make its statement in relation to that PI?
Well, when it comes to Robert's rules, you need to make it clear what it is that you're doing. So if a motion fails, then a new motion needs to be introduced, and in some cases you may amend a motion and say, let's consider these separately and proceed with this one.
Okay.
So thanks for that question. Anyone else? Okay, well thanks. I hope you found this useful. I am planning to do this again, and we will also have a couple of other versions of training available.
And those dates.
And we will provide those dates to you soon. Thanks very much for your participation, and have a great weekend.
You too, Mark. Bye.